All right, so let's start with the big story that we're tracking on WION at this hour, where US President Joe Biden has revealed that Washington has in fact struck a deal with the Taliban for safe passage of Americans. Now, Biden has said that the United States has an agreement that the Taliban will allow all Americans to leave Afghanistan. In yet another attempt to defend America's disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, the American president also rejected the criticism of his very poor handling of the withdrawal that led to complete chaos. Now, thousands in Afghanistan are facing a challenge to flee from the country, and Biden has warned that the operation to evacuate thousands through Kabul remains extremely risky. He's also called the emergency evacuation from Kabul airport as amongst one of the most difficult airlifts ever. The Biden has said that he cannot guarantee the final outcome of the very chaotic airlift. Joe Biden and also the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson have agreed to hold a virtual meeting of the G7 countries next week on the very fast unfolding developments in Afghanistan.
I cannot promise what the final outcome will be, or what it will be, that it will be without risk of loss. But as Commander-in-Chief, I can assure you that I will mobilize every resource necessary. This is one of the largest, most difficult airlifts in history, and the only country in the world capable of projecting this much power on the far side of the world with this degree of precision is the United States of America.
Now, Biden interestingly also said that he's not seen any indications of any Americans being stranded and unable to get to the Kabul airport. He further added that the evacuation is now taking place in coordination with the Taliban, as America is in constant contact with the Taliban leadership on the ground in Kabul and also in Doha. Joe Biden has also mentioned that during the ongoing evacuation operations, the US troops had briefly exited the Kabul airport at one point to try and get as many as about 169 American nationals from inside of the city. Now, thousands of Afghan citizens, remember, have crowded the Kabul airport gates in a hope that they could somehow get onto the tarmac, hopefully get into a plane and then flee from Afghanistan. Many were also in very desperate scenes, were seen passing their young children over the wall of the Kabul airport. Now, since the Taliban has seized the capital city, at least about 12 people have been killed in and around the airport in Kabul, some in American firing and some by firing by the Taliban. The deaths were of course caused by gunshots or in stampedes. America has so far airlifted at least about 13,000 people on American military aircrafts in less than a span of a week, as it is beating a hasty and a humiliating retreat. Now, Biden has cautioned that the American government does not know as to how many of the American nationals could still be in Afghanistan after 20 years of the American invasion. Now, the airlift involves Afghan allies and also foreigners and has seen the British, the Turkish, the French and other European military personnel also operating in Kabul. Now, 2 days back, Biden had hinted at an option to extend the 31st of August deadline for the American troops to leave Kabul. The US troops have secured the city's airport for evacuations, and the US evacuation flights from Kabul's airport stopped for more than 6 hours, while US authorities were looking for countries who were willing to accept the people who are desperately trying to flee Afghanistan. Now, remember, these are people who had worked for the Americans and other NATO allies in different capacities, helping their militaries in the fight against the Taliban, and it is these people who are being evacuated out by the NATO allies. Now, the evacuation flights resumed after a few hours long pause due to the bottleneck in Qatar to take the evacuees. The countries from Europe to the Middle East and Central Asia have agreed to allow the Americans and also other evacuated from Kabul. The United Arab Emirates has agreed to host about 5,000 Afghan evacuees for about 10 days on their way to a third country at the request of the Americans. Interestingly, Colombia will also be providing a temporary shelter to the Afghan citizens who had provided assistance to the American troops for many years. Now, Germany has also agreed with Washington to shelter people temporarily at the Ramstein Air Base. Afghan evacuees have begun transiting through the American air base in the Ramstein part of Germany, and a video released by the US Defense Department showed American soldiers at the base providing assistance to the Afghan families. The evacuees will be provided with medical screening, food and temporary lodging. And also our correspondent Susan Tehrani has been tracking the story very closely for us from the United States, and this is her report.
During his speech on Friday, U.S. President Joe Biden worked hard to frame the debate on whether or not the United States should leave Afghanistan or not, rather than focus on his policy execution, on the manner he left Afghanistan and the chaos that it ensued. His speech here at home was perceived, for the most part, as being divorced from reality, notably on the evacuation of Americans from the war-torn country. He said that Americans, as far as he knows, are able to safely bypass Taliban checkpoints and get to the airport. Also, he mentioned that there are no al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, and almost immediately after, his own Pentagon spokesperson, John Kirby, came out and said that while there is al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, it does not pose, at least for now, a serious threat to the American homeland. Now, on the international front, President Biden did catch heat as well, saying that, quote unquote, no questioning of our credibility from our allies around the world of his handling on Afghanistan. However, we do know that British lawmakers openly have condemned President Biden's handling of Afghanistan, as has the German incoming chancellor.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.